Right now, somewhere, a man is sitting alone in a quiet room. No phone in his hand. No television humming in the background. No music. Just silence. And within 4 minutes, his mind starts screaming at him to escape it. This is not a guess. It has been tested. In a study that stunned psychologists, people were left alone in a bare room for 15 minutes with nothing to do but think. No books. No screens. The only other option available to them was a device that delivered a mild electric shock. A significant number of people, men especially, chose to shock themselves, repeatedly, rather than sit with their own thoughts. Let that sink in for a moment. We will inflict physical pain on our own bodies before we will spend a quarter of an hour alone with our own minds. You already know this feeling. The itch that crawls up your spine the moment a room goes quiet. The reflex to grab your phone before you have even registered you picked it up. The way silence in a car or on a walk or in a waiting room feels less like peace and more like a threat. We call it loneliness. We blame the empty room. We blame the single life, the quiet apartment, or the friend who did not text back. But that is not what is actually happening. What you are running from is not the absence of other people. It is the presence of yourself. Unfiltered, unentertained, unable to perform for anyone. And somewhere along the way you stop being able to stand your own company. That is the reality. 2,000 years ago, a man was stripped of every distraction a human being could have. Exiled, isolated, cut off from his career, his friends, his city, and his identity. And by every account we have, he did not fall apart. He built something in that silence that made him more powerful than the empire that cast him out. His name was Seneca. And what he discovered in exile is the exact cure for the thing that is quietly ruining your life today. Stay with me through this one. Let us begin. In the year 41 AD, Lucius Annaeus Seneca, a rising Roman senator, a celebrated orator, and a man with real influence in the corridors of power, was banished from Rome by order of the Emperor Claudius. He was sent to the island of Corsica, a rugged, largely undeveloped territory on the edge of the Roman world, far from the Senate house, the courts, and the social machinery that had defined his entire adult life. We know this exile lasted roughly 8 years. We know a great deal about how Seneca experienced it, because he wrote about it directly in a text addressed to his own mother, known today as the Consolation to Helvia. It was written specifically to reassure her that he was enduring his isolation without being broken by it. Picture what this actually meant for a man like Seneca. Rome was not just his home. It was the entire architecture of his identity. In the capital, he was somebody. He was invited into rooms where decisions were made. His words carried weight in the Senate. His name meant something at dinner tables across the city. Corsica offered him none of that. Ancient writers described the island as remote and, by Roman standards of comfort, harsh. It was a place without the theaters, the libraries in full supply, the political intrigue, or the constant social current that a man of Seneca's stature had swum in his entire life. The comforts and status markers of Roman aristocratic life were simply not there waiting for him on that shoreline. For most men of his class, this would have been a slow psychological death. Losing your social standing in the ancient world was not just embarrassing. It was, in a very real sense, a kind of erasure. Who are you, if the world that used to reflect your importance back to you has gone silent? This is the turning point in the story, and it is the part most people skip past. Seneca had every reason to spiral. He had every reason to fill his days complaining, mourning his old life, and treating the silence around him as punishment. Instead, in the very writing that survives from this period, we see him doing something else entirely. He turns his exile into a kind of laboratory. He begins interrogating the question underneath all his suffering. What exactly has he lost? Not abstractly. Specifically, he walks through it with the precision of a man taking inventory. He lost his social rank. He lost his audience. He lost the noise of Rome. But when he asks whether he lost his mind, his reason, or his capacity to think clearly and live according to principle, the answer, again and again in his writing, is no. In the Consolation to Helvia, Seneca makes the case that exile only strips a man of geography, of position, and of the trappings that other people can grant or take away. What exile cannot touch is the internal architecture of a disciplined mind. The very things that made him useful and whole in his own account were never things Rome could hand him or Corsica could confiscate. This was not a single flash of insight that fixed everything overnight. The historical record suggests Seneca spent years in this exile. Years where the isolation was a constant, grinding condition of daily life, not a weekend retreat he could opt out of. What we witness in his surviving letters and essays is not a man who never struggled with solitude. It is a man who used the raw material of enforced aloneness to build something he did not have before. A self that did not depend on Rome's applause to feel steady. He read. He wrote. By later accounts, he studied natural philosophy during this period, turning his attention outward to the movement of the stars and the sea, and inward to the architecture of his own thinking, instead of only outward to the political theater he had been exiled from. And here is the detail that matters most, the one modern audiences tend to miss entirely. Seneca was eventually recalled from exile. He returned to Rome. He became, for a period, one of the most powerful men in the empire, as tutor and advisor to the young Emperor Nero. But the man who walked back into Rome was not simply the man who had left it. He carried something out of that island that no political appointment could have given him. Proof, tested under real deprivation, that his sense of self did not collapse without an audience. That proof is what we are actually chasing tonight. Here is the psychological mechanism underneath Seneca's story, and underneath your own discomfort with silence. From the moment you were a child, your sense of self was built socially. You learned who you were by watching how others reacted to you. The smile that meant you did well. The silence that meant you had disappointed someone. The laughter that meant you belonged. This is not a flaw. It is how every human brain develops an identity. We are, at the neurological level, wired to build our self-concept in relationship to other people watching us. The problem is what happens when that becomes the only way you know how to locate yourself. Modern life has taken this natural social wiring and turned it into something closer to an addiction. Every scroll, every like, every notification is a tiny external verdict on your worth, delivered by other people, on demand all day long. You have outsourced the job of confirming you exist to an audience that never sleeps. So when that audience disappears, when the room goes quiet, when the phone goes dark, and when you are finally truly alone, you do not just feel bored. You feel something closer to disorientation. Psychologists call this self-discontinuity. The unsettling sense that without external input, you are not entirely sure who is still there. That is the electric shock study again. People did not choose pain because they enjoy pain. They chose it because unstructured solitude, for a mind that has never practiced being alone with itself, does not feel like peace. Feels like standing at the edge of a void with no railing. This is exactly the trap the Stoics identified 2,000 years before neuroscience gave it a name. Their entire philosophy rests on one foundational distinction. There are things within your control and things outside it. Your reputation, other people's attention, whether a room is full or empty, none of that is within your control. But your judgments, your reasoning, and your relationship with your own mind, that is entirely yours. In every condition, in every room, with or without a single other person present. Seneca's exile was not valuable because isolation is inherently noble. It was valuable because it forcibly separated the parts of his identity that depended on Rome from the parts that did not. And what remained standing was the part worth building a life on. Here is the deeper truth this points to, the one worth sitting with. Your discomfort in solitude is not evidence that something is wrong with you. It is evidence of exactly where your identity has been quietly outsourced. Every time silence feels unbearable, it is showing you, with total precision, which parts of your sense of self are still rented from other people instead of owned by you. This has direct, practical consequences for anything you are trying to build. A career, a body of work, a creative project, or a version of yourself you actually respect. Because real achievement almost always requires long, unglamorous stretches of solitary effort. No applause. No audience. No external confirmation that you are doing it right. If you cannot tolerate that condition, you will unconsciously sabotage every project the moment it demands unwitnessed persistence. You will check your phone. You will seek a distraction. You will look for someone to tell you you are on the right track, because you do not yet trust yourself to know it. The person who can sit in silence without flinching has access to a kind of sustained, undistracted effort that the person who needs constant input simply does not. That is not a minor advantage. Over months and years, it compounds into the entire difference between people who finish what they start and people who do not. Here is how you actually build this capacity. Not as an abstract idea, but as a trained skill, the way you would train a muscle. Step 1. The structured solitude practice. Do not attempt to fix your relationship with solitude by throwing yourself into a silent retreat for a week. That is how you set yourself up to fail and confirm the exact anxiety you are trying to dismantle. Instead, start absurdly small and structured. Set a timer for 10 minutes. Sit in a room with no phone, no music, no book, nothing. Your only task is to notice what your mind does when it has nothing to perform for. You will likely feel restless within the first 90 seconds. That restlessness is not a problem to solve. It is the exact muscle you are training. Do not judge it. Do not narrate it as failing at meditation. Simply notice the urge to reach for a distraction and let it pass without obeying it. Do this daily. After a week, extend it to 15 minutes, then 20. The goal is not to achieve some blissful empty mind state. Stoicism was never about erasing thought. The goal is building direct evidence through repeated experience that you can remain intact, coherent, and safe in your own company without input from the outside world. Seneca did not get this from a single insight in a letter. He got it from years of actual exposure. You are compressing that exposure into a daily discipline instead of an 8-year exile. Step 2. The evening reflection. In the Stoic tradition of Seneca's own nightly practice, adapt this tonight. Before bed, spend 5 minutes with a notebook, no screen. Ask yourself 3 questions. First, where today did I seek external validation instead of trusting my own judgment? Second, where did I avoid silence by reaching for a distraction? And third, what did I do today that I would still be proud of if absolutely no one ever found out about it? That last question is the important one. It separates the parts of your behavior driven by an internal standard from the parts performed for an audience. Over weeks, this practice recalibrates your compass. You start acting from your own judgment first, and treating outside approval as a pleasant bonus rather than the entire point. Step 3. The solo confrontation walk. Once a week, take a walk of at least 30 minutes with no phone, no headphones, and no destination that requires you to perform or socialize. Just you and your own thinking moving through space. This single practice does something structured meditation alone cannot. It combines physical motion, which naturally regulates anxiety, with the same exposure to unstructured inner silence. Many of Seneca's own letters describe thinking most clearly while walking or traveling, away from the noise of the city. Use the walk to let a real problem in your life surface. Not to force a solution, but simply to think it through out loud in your own head, without an audience shaping how you present it. You will notice, over successive weeks, that your thinking becomes clearer and less anxious the more familiar this condition becomes. Step 4. Build one project in total silence. Choose something you are working on, a skill, piece of work, a goal, and commit to making meaningful progress on it without telling anyone until it is substantially underway. No public accountability post. No group chat update. No one cheering you on. This is the most direct test of everything above. It strips away the possibility of borrowed motivation from other people's attention, and forces you to discover whether your commitment can survive on your own judgment alone. This is exactly the position Seneca was placed in involuntarily on Corsica. Cut off from any audience, forced to discover what of his ambition and discipline was actually his, and what had only ever been performance. You are choosing to enter that condition voluntarily, in a smaller, safer form, specifically so you build the same internal strength without needing an emperor to exile you first. Somewhere on a rocky island in the Mediterranean, a man who had lost everything Rome could take from him discovered the one thing it could not touch. Not because solitude is comfortable, not because isolation is some romantic ideal, but because he finally had no choice except to find out what was left of him when no one was watching. Most of us will never be exiled. We will not be stripped of our rank, our city, or our position by force. But we are every single day given small voluntary invitations to do exactly what Seneca was forced to do, to sit for 10 unentertained minutes and discover who is still there. The silence you have been running from was never your enemy. It was the one room in your life where no one else's opinion could reach you, which means it is also the one room where you can finally hear your own. You do not need an island. You do not need 8 years. You need 10 minutes tonight with no phone in your hand, and the willingness to stay in the discomfort long enough to find out that you survive it. That is the whole cure. Not more noise. Less, deliberately, daily, on purpose. Until the room stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like the one place you were always meant to come home to. Stay stoic. If this gave you something to sit with tonight, subscribe. There is more of this waiting for you. Ancient wisdom, translated for the life you are actually living, one hard truth at a time. Until the next one. Stay steady, stay sharp, and never hand your peace to anyone but yourself.